Okay, Paul, I think everybody's muted and you should be good to go. We see your screen.
You see my Stephen Shields screen?
Yep.
All right, let me begin by welcoming everyone this evening, and I'm sorry I didn't get through the preliminaries to greet everyone by name, but I'm delighted to see familiar faces and some that are not, and both are welcome. The forum has been going now for almost 2 years, every Monday evening, and it's just fascinating to me to see the wealth of information that comes across as our various presenters share with us. This evening will be a little different because Steve has asked to let us interview him rather than to proceed with the presentation like we've commonly had previously. I will begin with a few questions and we'll open it up for everyone to be able to use your questions, and so we'll extend in that process. But let me introduce Steve first. He is the author of the most comprehensive history of the Smith-Rigdon movement and its various expressions, now in its 5th edition. He lives in South Korea and therefore is addressing us from tomorrow. His roots in the LDS Church traced to a cousin of Brigham in the wagon where Brigham rose to say, "This is the place." His roots have borne fruit in the community of Christ, where he has served as field minister in Korea, and I think he's still serving there. And he writes extensively. My understanding is that he has a new illustrated book on Nauvoo, anticipated through John Whitmer any day now. He is on the John Whitmer Historical Association Book Committee, examining the manuscripts that I'm submitting, and so I'm in hopes that you'll give him a very favorable welcome with your best questions tonight. But I hope that my questions don't offend in the process.
Thanks, Paul.
Steve has recently commissioned a street artist in Korea for a painting of Joseph Smith. My understanding is that the artist was given a postcard reference, and the painting that I am showing here is the result. And I'm most impressed that it's one of the most profound, remarkable expressions of what I think Joseph Smith probably looked like that we could have. But that, because right now we're in the midst of this remarkable news of the recent discovery of a daguerreotype in the Joseph Smith III, the Larson family, that probably represents Joseph's 1844 image when taken by Lucian Foster, who I'm pleased to announce I had his name in my timeline on the Mansion House story beginning April 29 of 1844. He was there as a daguerreotypist, and we have the information in Joseph Smith III memoir that he did make a daguerreotype of Joseph's father. But finally, here is what we think probably is that daguerreotype. It was worn in a brooch by Emma, by Bertha Smith, that's Joseph III's wife, and then the later Smith ladies as well. So now that means that last week we have a fascinating comparison. S. Michael Tracy has put together a beautiful book that is to show the photograph of Joseph Smith. That's dated 2008, and the image is on the left. I'm amused a bit because the image is so much like the image that you would see in the Nauvoo pageant if you went to see Joseph Smith in the Nauvoo pageant. Tall, blonde, and quite athletic, very, very plain, straightforward, clean-cut features. The Korean image on the right then is out of the street artist, and then the daguerreotype is there in the center. And so I wanted to put this in because my understanding is that Steve is the one that commissioned the Korean painting. And so I would pause to see if he has any comment here, or any of the rest of you do, because
actually, I had that painting done about almost 50 years ago. Not quite, maybe 46 years, 47 years ago. And I had the postcard that is commonly available, at Community of Christ Church historic sites now. And so I had it's about half the size of the original painting that's in Community of Christ archives. And a few years ago, when I was preparing to move back to Korea in my retirement, I gave that painting to Lok Makai at Nauvoo. So whether he's just put that up in his office or stuck it upstairs in the storage, I don't know, but I can't throw things away. So, but it was something I wanted to do as a souvenir, and the artist did a pretty decent job using just the small postcard as the model. And the postcard, of course, is a photograph of that original painting that has been in the church museums over the years.
And I attribute that painting to 1842, and it would have been painted to go on the opposite side of the mantle from Emma. The two paintings are clearly by the same artist, and that's one of the evidences, I think, that the mansion house was actually built in 1842, not in as many historians project. But I'll be getting that published with the story of Nauvoo before too long. We'll leave that matter and allow further comment if people would care to. But let us have our evening prayer. Heavenly artist, whose paintings bless the skies at dawn and evening time, in whose image we see ourselves mirroring occasionally the joyous and the sublime, whose multidimensionality exceeds our apprehension, as do waves of light, of sound, of humanity, and waves upon the sea. For we see and hear so little in the spectrums, in the smallness of our own humanity. In the waves of history, we find mystery so profound, yet we glimpse your influence nudging toward a promised land where patience and love abound. We see schisms, false prophets, families torn by religious dissent, and we wonder where is hope for healing, intellecty, Zionic intent. How can there be a land of restoration, of peace and harmony somehow to be accomplished out of our diversity? You call us, you whisper, you nudge us into neophyte roles to do our part to elevate toward the immortality of souls. And this evening we ask your blessing, your indulgence of the Spirit from which every good thing yields, and especially upon our guest presenter to be interviewed, the historian minister Stephen Shields. And as we seek to understand his person, his pathway, his pursuit, we ask as well that our participants make inquiry that is perspicacious, productive, and astute, that our image of you and ourselves will be enhanced toward the eternally sublime, for we are so grateful that you have given us life in this probationary time. We pray in the name of Jesus, whose image reaches across time and cultures to impress with love. Amen. Stop share there. All right, Steve, since we are on an interview.
Okay, yeah. Well, Paul, let me say something first, if you don't mind. I was frustrated with our communication problem, but now I understand what the problem was. I retired from full-time church service in, let me think, 6 years, 8 years ago, something like that. And so since that time, I've not had a Sea of Christ email address. When Paul and I first corresponded, I used my Yahoo email address. And so that I'm sorry that there was a miscommunication about the email, Paul. That can be very frustrating, I know. But trust me, it's not you. It's just that when someone retires from church service, they lose their email address pretty quickly.
That's why you got blocked. And so
That's what happened, is that there's no email address, so it bounced back at you probably. So
and I had a few hours of sweaty palms.
oh dear. Well, I
Prepared-
went to bed last night, the 25th here, and I thought, well, I wonder if this interview is happening or not. I've not received any information. And this morning when I got up, looking at my Facebook feed, a friend had posted saying, "Hey, everybody, come and join this show." So I quickly sent him a message and saying, "Oh, is it still happening? I've not heard a word." So I'm glad we're here, and I'm glad we got online and all that. I live in Korea as a retired person. I'm active in church. I go to church and take an active role in our Community of Christ congregation here in Seoul. But as a retired senior priesthood member, I try and sit at the back and let the young people take the lead and be available if they want to ask a question or advice. But I really try to let the young folks out in front. Us old folks can sit back and encourage them and help them become the ministers and leaders that they need to be. So I teach the children's Sunday school class, the little kids. So I enjoy that. I spend much of my time as president of the Royal Asiatic Society in Korea. We're affiliated with the London-based, very ancient organization, Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland. And it's a volunteer job. It's not paid, but I spend quite a few hours a day working on various and sundry things of an organization that's now 122 years old. When Paul first approached me and had some initial thoughts about what I might present, I said, well, I don't have my library here. Libraries are kind of hard to move. And so I don't have any of my resources here that I could have done something specific about, how the different expressions of the movement deal with the Book of Mormon. I will say that of the 500 roughly that I've cataloged from, the 1830s and until the present, there's about 120 that are around today. Some of them are internet, Ethernet only existing groupings of people on a common theme. Some of them are small groups. Some of them are a little bit more well organized. But of those 120, give or take a few, the Book of Mormon is all part of the history and the heritage. And as you might expect, there's varying degrees of, where does it fit on the spectrum of that particular expression's approach to their mission and ministry. So that just kind of a preface, Paul. I hope that helps set a stage maybe for us.
That's a good beginning. I intended to ask you to go back to trace some of your own history, because
Okay.
looking at the Gospel Tangents interview,
Uh-huh.
interesting to see that you had this very deep history in the LDS movement, and I thought you'd retrace some of that for us.
Yeah. Well, on both sides of my family, my father's and my mother's sides, we go back to the original church. My dad's family were from Scotland, They joined the original church in 1841 in Scotland and immigrated to the US about 10 years later. And of course, by that point in the 1850s, Brigham Young was the only one they really knew about. And so they took a ship out of Liverpool to New Orleans, took a paddle wheeler up to St. Louis, and took a smaller paddle wheeler up the Missouri to Westport, where they outfitted, and then they took an angle across to the trail in Nebraska. They didn't go up to Omaha or what was that called in the LDS, winter quarters. They didn't go there. They took an angle across what is now the corner of Kansas and headed to Utah. My mother's side of the family came from England to the United States in what is now the United States. It wasn't then. It was Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1624, and lived in that same city in Massachusetts for the next 200 years. And mid 1830s, it was 1837. Brigham Young and some of the other newly minted apostles were on a mission to the eastern United States. Brigham Young's wife was a cousin of my great-great-grandfather's wife. And as they were wont to do in those old days, they would, hit up connections through relatives and family members, and hospitality being what it was, they could generally be welcomed in the home and have a place to stay and a meal or something. And so Brigham tells great-great-grandpa about this Joseph Smith fellow, and he's intrigued enough where he and Brigham got on horses and rode horseback from Massachusetts to Kirtland, Ohio, where great-great-grandpa meets Joseph Smith, is sufficiently satisfied that this is the place he needs to be. So he's baptized by Brigham Young in the river down the hill from the temple. Can't think of the name of the river all of a sudden.
Mississippi.
Huh?
The Mississippi.
The Mississippi, not in Kirtland, Ohio, I don't think.
I'm sorry. I thought you said, I got the wrong time period. Yeah.
Chagrin River, right?
Okay.
Chagrin,
yeah.
Chagrin, yeah. He was baptized on July 24th, 1837. Interestingly enough, 10 years later to the day, he's in the wagon with Brigham Young overlooking Salt Lake Valley, sick with fever. Brigham Young leans up, looks out and says, "Okay, this is the right place, drive on." You may know the story. July 24th, 1847. 2 days later, Grandpa wakes up. He was still delirious from fever, and he gets out of the tent and looks around, and he goes to Brigham. He says, "Brigham, what the heck have you done to us? Where are we?" That's an apocryphal story, but I can only imagine that there must have been a little bit of surprise because I think many of them thought they were going to go to San Francisco.
Yes, they did.
And the Salt Lake Valley, before, when they got there, I mean, it was a pretty bleak place, heavy alkali soil, and nothing, very few trees around. It was a pretty wide open, place. It would have been quite a difference from Massachusetts or even the Midwest, so those early folks, that Vanguard company, had lots of guts to say, well, okay, we're willing to give it a try, and they built a community out of nothing. So I mean, they had something going for them, but the interesting thing that they never tell the story of August 24th, 1847. 1 month after they arrived, Brigham Young, my great-great-grandpa, and several other men, there were maybe 10 or 11 of them, got on horses and rode their horses all the way back to Omaha at winter quarters. Brigham Young made one more trip back to Utah from winter quarters and never left again. My great-great-grandpa made that trip 4 times. Even in a car today, it's rather tiresome trip.
Yeah.
I can't imagine riding horses from what is now Salt Lake City to Omaha, Nebraska, and then turning around a few weeks later and doing it again, you know, and it just, those people were really something else, I think. So I was raised in the Utah tradition, and I joined what is now Community of Christ. Let me think, 41 years ago, as a young adult, and that's where I've been ever since.
And there probably would be somebody that would ask why. I'll
I
defer.
was
Why?
about to do that. Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I was just so impressed with all the wonderful architecture and the well-organized programs and the really sophisticated leaders of the RLDS Church. Those of you who are from that same tradition know that I'm joking. I joined the church in Salt Lake City. As one church leader said many decades ago from independence, he said, "Oh, the heart of enemy territory." But the congregation that I joined in Salt Lake City was a group of people who, as all of us, we all have baggage. You know, I mean, wherever we're from, we all have baggage. We all have our shortcomings, and they knew that, you know, I had baggage, but they were willing to help me lift that baggage and carry it. They were a wonderful group of people who, they knew where I was from. They knew that I was an enemy, so to speak. I dragged my feet on in those days, you know, before the current rules about being able to join on original baptisms. I kind of dragged my feet about being baptized, and you know, I was going through some personal problems. Had lots of stress and frustration in my life, and our branch president, pastor, said, "Steve, until you just give it all up and give it to God, it's never going to go away." And he said, "You know, just take a leap of faith." So he was right, and I went down into the waters of baptism for the 77th time, and he baptized me. And when I came up out of the water, that weight was lifted. The problems weren't solved, but the weight was lifted. So it was quite a profound experience for me. That's a personal faith story. It's not, you know, not everybody would have that same experience, but for me, that was a good experience. I went on later to work full time for the church, which is never where I would have expected to head, but it happened anyway. And during my almost 30 years of service in the church, I spent years in Los Angeles and working in the stake there. Was sent to Korea for the second mission to Korea. My first mission was as a 19-year-old Mormon missionary. My second mission was as the Community of Christ pastor, and was told to resurrect a dead church. Let me tell you, resurrecting the dead is really a big job. But we had some success, and the church here in Korea still exists, and still a vibrant community of people who are doing some really wonderful things in the neighborhood. You know, I'm really glad to come back as a retiree and be a part of that family. I spent many years wandering all of Asia as a leadership development person for Community of Christ, and living and working in India and China, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Thailand, the Philippines, just all over the place. Then the last few years of my service, I was based at headquarters helping the publications process and working on how we present the church and developing manuscripts so that they could be better translated into other languages. And that was good work too. I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed working with our huge group of very professional translators that we have from all over the world. And then, so that kind of brings us up. Oh, so I probably should clarify my 77 baptisms. Anybody curious about that?
Which baptism?
I can imagine.
I was baptized at 8 by my father. Then when I was a teenager, I went to the Salt Lake Temple and was baptized for 75 dead people. And then my Community of Christ baptism in 1981. So if you're not familiar with baptism for the dead, you are physically, literally dunked for each person. So it was in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, and all in about 20 minutes. And then I was confirmed for all of those people, one at a time. So that was.
Were they relatives of yours?
I had no idea who they were. Yeah, no, they were just the list of people on the list that were waiting to do that. So.
Let me go back to your comments about translations, because
Okay.
the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum, and so I'm particularly interested what message you see the Book of Mormon providing for people in Nepal and India and China.
Well, we have a translation now. The LDS Church has their translations, Community of Christ has their translations. And when I say we, I generally am referring to Community of Christ, and I should be a little more objective than that, I suppose. But Community of Christ has a Korean, Japanese, and Chinese language translation of the Book of Mormon. There is not one for any of the languages in India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, or the other places in Southeast Asia, the Philippines. In the Philippines, if they need a Tagalog or some other language translation, and as many other countries, they'll use the LDS Church's translations, even though the chapters are different. You have to twickle them back and forth to be able to match it all up. But for most people in Asia, the Book of Mormon doesn't have much impact for them. Charles Neff, who was an apostle in Community of Christ, RLDS, who was the first on the ground missionary really in Japan. People in Japan, and by extension other parts of Asia, said, well, Mormon, whatever, that stuff, we don't understand what all that stuff is. Tell us why we should believe in Jesus Christ. And so early on, the message in Japan and Korea, and then a little later in India, those all happened in the 50s and 60s. Taiwan came along a lot later in the 70s. Even though Neff sponsored translations and funded translations and publications of the Book of Mormon, and people, were reading it and studying and all of that, the overriding message was Jesus Christ. And people were barely Bible literate. Even today in Japan, probably only maybe less than 3% of the Japanese people are Christians. Very, very tiny fraction. In Korea, it's bigger, 25% of the population. And I need to say, South Korea. Only about 25% of the population here is Christian. About 50% are still Buddhist, which was the traditional religion here in the over the last 1500 years or so. Before that, it was a shamanistic type of a faith, and shamanism still exists to a small degree in most of Asia. Because of the tremendous anti-Mormon feelings by most Protestants in Asia, we're sometimes hard pressed when the Book of Mormon comes up here, and I'll speak specifically here in Korea, because the LDS are much bigger, much better known, and they they don't know much about what do we call it, the minority report, so to speak. But Neff made the folks do something really good. The LDS Church had the first translation of the Book of Mormon, and they used a word that means scripture. So it comes out Mormon scripture, like the Bible. The Bible, the Korean word literally translated is holy scripture. The Buddhist scriptures are called the Buddhist scriptures. So that same word for scripture was used all throughout. Neff suggested that they be more literal in the translation. It is not the Mormon Bible, it is the Book of Mormon. And so our Community of Christ edition of the Book of Mormon is literally that, Book of Mormon. And so the titles are different. The two different churches have different titles. The word Mormon is still there, but we use book, the LDS use scripture. Now, of course, theologically, we would see that as scripture, but the title of the book is more honestly translated, I think, more accurately. I shouldn't say honest, because the Mormons aren't dishonest. More accurately translated as book rather than Bible or scripture. And we do talk about it in our Community of Christ here, and we've got copies available for people that want to read it. And many of our newer members say, well, okay, but I haven't even read the Bible yet. Don't give me more books to read. let me get the Bible first. So when I teach and work with the kids or work with the leaders of the congregation, we spend quite a bit more time dealing with trying to understand the Bible. Many who are Community of Christ would be familiar with the Worship Helps that is published by the church with a theme and scripture readings each Sunday. And I tend in my own preaching, and I need to say this is a Korean speaking church, it's all Koreans who are at church except for me and one or two others that are, I call us white Koreans. So I'm teaching and preaching in Korean language. I tend to, in my own preaching ministry, I tend to go towards New Testament readings, gospel readings, and letters rather than Old Testament's really tough to talk about, I think. So in my own teaching and helping others in their preaching ministries and teaching ministries, I tend to look at, what are the upcoming focus scriptures, what are the New Testament readings? Let's talk about those. And so, most of our folks, even our younger priesthood members, are still novices when it comes to a background in Christianity. Being raised in the U.S., there's a the culture has been heavily Christian for most, and I look around the room here and I say all of us never even gave a conscious thought about whether or not we would be Christian. That's just how we were raised, and whether it be LDS or RLDS or other Christian communities, it was just part of society. And so we tend to have quite a bit of familiarity with a lot of the basic stories that would come to mind if I were to ask you to list them. That's not true in Asia. It's a very different, it's becoming more and more true here in Korea, but it's a very different perspective. Christianity in Korea is only 150 years old. How old is Christianity in North America and Europe? It's more than 15 times older than that. So, I mean, there's a different learning curve. The Book of Mormon's here, it's not a focus. And Nepal and India, most of our ministry with Community of Christ in India has been with some of the poorest of the poor. Any of you who've read the Bolton book about Charles Neff, or who may remember Charles Neff, he was really rather aggressive about that. And many in the areas of India where Community of Christ has worked are not even able to read or write. Book of Mormon becomes less and less important in those kinds of areas as far as a focus of ministry. And bottom line is it's a mixed bag. And it depends a lot on the history. It depends on the society that we're working in. And a lot with the resources that the church has available. The LDS church now has either complete or partial translations, I think, of more than 100 languages in the Book of Mormon. Community of Christ, we have maybe 10, something like that, maybe not even 10. So it's a resource issue. Translation alone is a very costly effort. Printing, again, brings additional, any of you been in the printing business like I was before, it's just amazing how much it costs to get a book out, in a hard copy and then they don't want to pay the price. So my book, Divergent Paths, the 5th edition, the publisher, the book's over 1,000 pages long. And the publisher said, we can't print a book that long and sell it for a reasonable cost. Nobody could afford to buy it. It'd be a couple $100. And they said, so we'll just do an ebook. And while I'm not opposed to technology, I tend to be more of a Luddite. And if I can't drop it and break my toe, I'm not sure I trust the book. Kind of a thing. But many people made that same complaint to the publisher, and they just announced to me that they're going to issue a print version that will be available for the first time at the September meeting of the John Whitmer Historical Association in Independence. It'll be 2 volumes, paper bound. Probably, what did they tell me? It's going to be $50 or $60 even then. That's paper and ink and production costs. So in the Community of Christ Translations department, there's not a big priority of doing more languages of the Book of Mormon. We tend to spend more time on the Doctrine and Covenants, especially the more recent sections. People have more connection. In fact, in Korea, our people have a lot more connection with Doctrine and Covenants sections than the Book of Mormon. It's current, it's new, it's people that we have been able to meet. So that makes it a little more, what's the word I want to use? Tangible is not exactly what I'm thinking about, but I think maybe you might get me. I see a hand raised in my screen here. I can't see who it is.
Stephen.
Oh, Frank, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned 3 names of languages, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese. Was that what they were?
Yes.
Okay, that have been done there.
Yep.
Nothing in Nepal?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
A lot of it has to do too with church populations. Now, Neff pushed the translations in Japan and Korea, even when we had only a handful of church members. Taiwan came along a lot later. There was, there used to be lots of American presence in Taiwan before the U.S. switched its allegiance to Beijing. And so there were large numbers of university professors who were Community of Christ. Now, the LDS Church has Chinese versions, but we had a bilingual church member who did the translation, and it was published, I want to say 1978 in Taiwan, I think the first edition. But even so, the church membership population in Taiwan is still very small. When we get to Nepal, we have probably in Community of Christ there's several hundred members there, but many are not literate. In India, we have Community of Christ has several thousand members, many of whom are not literate. But in India, there's not one single language. There's 500 languages in India, and Community of Christ on a daily basis works in at least 6 or 7 of those languages. And most of those people can't communicate across those language barriers. So that adds complexity to translation work. When I was, responsible for those kinds of things in places like India, we focused on 3 major languages where we had the larger population groups. We did current Doctrine and Covenant sections and a few temple school courses, and we developed a priesthood handbook for international use, where it was kind of digested down from the English language version to focus very specifically in a little simpler approach for people to learn. But printing those, the printings aren't fancy. We basically go to the local print shop, Kinko's or whatever would be the equivalent in the US perhaps, and print 100 copies, and they bind them with a plastic comb, and that's what we can do, so that's what we do.
Thank you, Steve, because I had the chance to read your Divergent Paths this last week. Yes, it is 1,000 pages, but I got it on Kindle and was able to peruse it. I'm delighted to point out to you that there are at least 3 people on the screen tonight that are mentioned in your book.
There are. Let me think. Jason Smith is one of them.
Nope, there's 4 of them.
I don't know who else is on the.
Okay, well, Frank Fry, Ron Smith, and Blair Bryant are all on.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And so wanted to give them recognition, but I also wanted them to move to the normal process here, so that people, if you go to the reactions down at the bottom of the screen and raise your hand, Deb Luce is well practiced at keeping us in order in terms of being able to ask questions and get good responses. And so let me invite you to raise your hand and be called on in turn.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I see Bill Gunlock's on here. Bill, hi.
Bill Gunlock, you'll know, although he's not in the book.
He's not in the book, but Bill's a Taiwan expert.
All right.
Taiwan church expert. He spent several years as a retired volunteer in Taipei with the church until just a couple 3 years back, I think, when you came back to the States. Bill, was it?
Well, yes, and you have Bruce Nelson on, who's also spent time there. So I recognize them.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Okay, we got a couple folks with their hands up, and I did see Michael Riggs has his hand up, not the official way. So Michael will be second. Bruce will be first.
Okay.
Bruce, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was going to Asia in the late 80s and the early 90s. I lived in Japan for 3 years, but back when I was traveling to Taiwan and to Korea, I want to just mention an experience I had at the church there in Korea. I told in Korea, the businesses like to be with you all the time. They feel it's part of their duty as a host to be with their guest. So when I said I wanted to attend my congregation in Seoul, one of the young men said, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian, I'll go with you." And, so we're sitting in the service, and he turns to me and says, "Why, you people are just like one big family," which was what I was feeling. But that congregation is like that.
Yeah.
And in fact, he said afterwards, he said, well, I've never done this before, but he invited me to his home to visit his home personally. Now, the public spaces in Seoul are beautiful, but the homes are very crowded. I think they had like 10 people sleeping in one room. And to invite a foreigner there was a huge mark of respect,
Yeah.
but it just was an indication of the comfort that he had from that experience there. And I think that you may have a sense of recognition of that experience.
Bruce, that in the Korean cultural context, that is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Because Koreans, when they entertain guests, it's almost never at home because they don't have the space. It's
Exactly.
even big houses in Korea, which here in Seoul would cost a couple of $1 million for an apartment of about 1,200 square feet, let's say. I would suspect many of you live in houses much bigger than 1,200 square feet. Put a family of 6 in 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a kitchen and a living room in 1,200 square feet. So Koreans rarely entertain at home. It's a terrible imposition on their privacy. So when a Korean invites a person to come into their home, it's a very, very high mark of respect and trust. I once had I'll call it an argument, but it was not a knockdown, drag out argument with my apostle, who criticized my use of elders' expense for eating out all the time. And I said, but brother, that's the only way I can meet with members of the congregation is to invite them to dinner or lunch and pay for their meal. And he said, well, you're spending so much money, you've got to reduce that. And I said, well, it's either that or I don't visit with the members because I can't invite myself into their homes. It doesn't work that way. So it's a different culture. Yeah. But you're right, Bruce. The folks here, we did worship online for 2 years because of the COVID pandemic, and even though churches were allowed to meet, our folks said, we don't want to become famous like some of the other churches in Korea who've had these massive outbreaks of infections. Let's just do it online. Let's do Zoom. And so for 2 years, I didn't have to get up very early on Sunday morning to go to church. And I didn't even have to shave because you can't tell whether I've shaved or not, right? So this spring, when the restrictions were eased considerably here in Korea, we chatted and we said, well, let's meet, let's get back in person. And I'm thinking, I have to get up early because it's about an hour and a half for me to get to church on the train. And I used to do it, and I loved it, but I got lazy. And I said, well, if I wake up Sunday morning without an alarm and it's time enough to get ready and go to church, I'll go. Otherwise, I'll just do it online. So I was up at 7 o'clock in the morning and was off to church. And as Bruce said, it was the people, it was that family nature that was so, and I hadn't realized how much I had missed that while we were on the restrictions. And it was the right thing to do. And I don't mind getting up. It's, early, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, that's not really terribly early. But it's a long trek on the train. I thankfully live not too far from a train station, subway station, and I can make the trip pretty easily. Sunday mornings, the trains are not crowded at that hour, so I can usually get a seat for about a 45-50 minute train ride, and a little bit of walking and a small shuttle bus at the end. But yeah, Bruce, thanks for that comment. I'm rambling on, and there's others. Casey Kern, you had your hand up next.
Actually, hold on, Casey.
Sorry. Oh, I'm not supposed to call on people. Okay, sorry.
All right, we got Michael Riggs who.
Oh, Riggs.
Can I make one more comment?
I talk with Riggs all the time. What, what's up, Mike?
I was just going to ask you, Steve, I know that early on in your process of, and I think ongoing with Divergent Paths, you had this voluminous correspondence that was going on with all these different various churches.
Yep.
And being in Korea, like you mentioned, you're not with your books anymore and that kind of thing. Is that being maintained with the, are you keeping those correspondence up so that you can have a volume 6 someday? Or
I do not foresee that I will ever do 6th edition myself.
okay,
I think I'm going to turn that over to Jason Smith.
that's a good plan. Good plan.
He and I haven't talked about that, but
The other question is a much more theological question.
yeah.
Since you've been in both places, which has the best barbecue, Korea or Kansas City?
Well, it's apples and oranges, Mike, because the barbecue styles are different. It's like, which is better, Tennessee or Kansas City barbecue?
Well, Kansas City.
That would be a closer comparison. Korean barbecue is completely different, and I like both. We don't have lots of American style barbecue here. Meat's terribly expensive here.
Yeah.
So, if I'm going to spend money on barbecue, it's always Korean. I did import a couple of bottles of Kansas City style barbecue sauce. Not the best. It was what I could get. So it's Heinz brand, and it's you know what I mean. It's close, but not perfect. And sometimes at home I'll do something and use that. But yeah, when I'm in, if I'm ever in the Kansas City area, there's always a trip to, or what is it? Gates is one that was in Independence for a long time. I think it burned down though.
Arthur Bryant's is the one.
Arthur Bryant's is the big one, but
it's the one true barbecue.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, Casey, now it's your turn, and then Ron Smith. Go ahead, Casey.
All right, thank you. Steve, this is fascinating for me. I actually live in Korea. I'm in Korea right now. I'm in your time zone. So
yeah. Whereabouts do you live?
I'm near the express bus terminal in Seoul.
I'm on line 3 at Yangjae-yo.
Okay, well, I was going to say first we need to get together sometime and
Love
talk.
it.
Also, I'm super interested in the Korean version of the book of the Community of Christ, Book of Mormon.
Okay.
Was not aware such a thing existed. I'd love to be able to see that if I ever get a chance.
You want a copy?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Also, I have published my own version of the Korean Book of Mormon based on the BYU Maxwell Institute study edition that has like headings and stuff like that. It's got the LDS versification, but I'm going to put a link to that in the chat here.
Okay.
That may be something that you may be interested in checking out. It may be of some value to you and your congregation. Also, I am in the bishopric of LDS congregation in Gangnam, and I would love to get the cousins together somehow, some way. I don't know what the relations have been through the years, if any, but
none at all.
That's what it seems like.
None at all.
Anyway, if there are any bridge building opportunities, I'd love to be a part of that somehow.
Well, I'd like that. The LDS Church has changed a lot of their translation vocabulary.
Yeah.
From the time I was a missionary here in the 70s. I went to the translation office and asked for a lexicon, and they refused to give it to me because I was an apostate.
Oh.
So I tend not to spend time on negative relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of avoided, not avoided deliberately, but my focus is elsewhere, and I'm too busy to deal with that. So, but I mean, if there were a group of people that were interested in church history, which I'm hard pressed to find too many in Korean LDS or Community of Christ who are. It'd be fun to get together and have a chat. But
sure.
how can I get your contact info, Casey?
No, I think we're already connected on Facebook.
Oh, are we? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
believe so.
All right. Well, we can hook up. Sunday when I go to church, I'll pick up a copy of the Book of Mormon and bring it home, and we'll get together and you can
Okay,
give it to you.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Very good.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Ron, go ahead, please. You have to unmute.
Now
Ron,
I'm
unmute. There we go. Hi, Ron.
Hi. So I took some notes. I have a couple of questions, but
Okay.
I'll try one and see what happens. I know that in Taiwan that there is a small restoration group
Yes.
with Dan Brotherton
Right.
and some. Have you has the restoration, and I know there's a restoration group in the Philippines. Is there a restoration? Do you find that in Korea and in other places in Asia that there have been restoration groups and Community of Christ in similar locations?
Those are the only two places I know of, Ron.
Okay.
Years ago, when I was responsible for Taiwan, when I was the mission center president here in Asia, oh dear, what was their names?
Pauline?
Charlotte?
Yeah.
Oh,
The American couple.
The-
Older American couple. Was her name Charlotte or
Charlene?
Charlene or something, Ron?
Yes.
They were they were the missionaries for the restoration group out east of Taipei.
Yeah.
Can't think of their names right now. Sam, maybe, was his name Sam?
There's Sam Campbell.
Kemple, that's it. Yeah, Kemple. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. When I was mission center president, and that was up until 2004, so that's been a long time ago now. I went out to their branch in Keelung a couple of times. The Kemples would often come in to Taipei to our congregation on Communion Sundays. So there was a pretty friendly relation. Mary Lou, who was our pastor in Taipei, she knew the Campbells from way back, and she wanted to use our church's registration to sponsor a visa for them, and that wouldn't have been appropriate, under the way things were, but there was for the most part some friendly relations there. The Philippines, I don't know. I have very little experience in the Philippines. Here in Korea, we don't have anything like that. There might be something in India. I had a chat with Fred Larson and Dave Bowerman when Dave and he were still alive and members of the first presidency of the Remnant Church. And the conversation went something, and it was at the time when I was working in India as leadership development. We sat down in their office, and Fred said, Steve, he said, what's been the church's experience in India? And I said, well, the basic story, Chuck Naft back in the 60s. He says, what I want, he says, some of my 12 are really they're pushing to, set up missionary work there. And I said, well, I certainly think we all should consider opportunities wherever they are. But I said, you need to know this. I said, we've made a multiple tens of thousands of dollars a year commitment to India for the past 60 or 70 years, and there's no end in sight. So it depends on what your resources are like, because you won't, where we've been working in India, there will never be enough local financial resources to keep things going. In the Philippines, they're fully self-sufficient. In Taiwan, they're fully self-sufficient. Here in Korea, in Japan, we're all fully, we pay all of our own bills. We don't get subsidies from World Church at all. So I told Fred and Dave, I said, you need to consult with people, but you also need to look at resources and priorities. And if any of you who may know Fred Larson's work, his big focus was building the City Bountiful project in eastern Jackson County, and he really didn't want to detract from that. I mean, they limited financial resources. You have to have a focus, and all of us, regardless of which church family we're part of, financial resources are a big deal, and there's only so far you can. My mother could stretch a dollar bill from here to the corner and back, but you can only do so much of that. So it's a tough one. But Ron, I don't know a current status of those two groups at all. I've not been involved church-wise in Taiwan now for almost 20 years, and the Philippines a little less than that. But there's nothing here in Korea, and as far as I know, nothing in Japan.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I did have one other question that I'll ask, and
Sure.
I'm probably not the right one to ask this one because we do have some of our Bickertonite Church of Christ people that are around. But I know in Africa we've run into the Bickertonites, and they have they always push the Book of Mormon really heartily. And you talked about the number of translations that the LDS and the Community of Christ have. Are there any of the other groups that are? I know there are other groups that are real big on the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Are there any of the other groups that are into the translations like?
Well, the Bickerton folks are.
Yes.
They have several languages. I don't have a current list of what all the languages are, but one of their earlier overseas missions, or outside of the U.S. missions, was in Italy. So they had a very early on Italian language translation, and definitely a Spanish language translation, and my memory's failing, but I'm pretty sure there's 2 or 3 others that they've done.
Yeah.
At least. So, but again, any of those folks that are involved in that, they'll tell you that it's trying to do translation and publication of a book. It just sucks the resources worse than your car sucks gasoline. It's a big deal to do it. And but as far as I know, there aren't any others that have attempted full-scale translations.
Thank you.
Looks like Monty, you're next, and then Paul. Go ahead, Monty.
Well, I just wanted to say that one of the things that we've been privileged to have is our LDS brother come in and give us some insights into the vast study and work that they've done with the church for, like everything from archaeology to genealogy,
right,
and all the different apologetics.
Right.
But it's been fascinating for me listening to everybody, and I really appreciate everyone who participates. And we just wanted to say thank you.
Very good.
Steve, oh, excuse me.
Go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
All right. Yeah, Steve, Dan Brotherton went down to Mindanao, the Philippines.
Right.
And I wonder how that has turned out. Any word?
I don't know. Ron Smith might know a little more than me.
That would be a difficult mission to do because
Mindanao itself is a difficult place to go. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. Very dangerous.
Yeah.
I don't have firsthand knowledge, but my brother Doug has been to the Philippines a number of occasions,
okay.
and they have Zoom communications with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That connection was through Australia, actually. There was a couple there, a mail order bride from the Philippines, and she became a member of the church, and then shared with her relatives, and so that's been kind of an interesting story. But
Thank you.
Hmm.
Paul, Bill, were you done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Paul, go ahead and then Aspie.
All right, I again wanted to thank you for sharing with us tonight, Steve. And as I read your book last week, I was intrigued and charmed by the stories of Black Pete, of the Horosites. But since you mentioned being an apostate, I was particularly charmed by the idea of Zion's First International, which is the quorum of 12 apostates.
Right. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. That was a more of a tongue-in-cheek sort of a group. Yeah. Well, an apostate is the opposite of an apostle, I suppose.
That was bad, Steve.
I'm sorry.
I did want to compliment you on the fact that you have found neutral terms and even complementary terms where schismatic or dissenters and so forth are carrying negative connotations. And by going to the divergent paths, you basically maintained equanimity, and I appreciate your treatment of people that way. And I think probably you have people like Blair Bryant coming up shortly, so let him speak for himself. But the fact is that people are on the forum here tonight sharing with you. I think all of them feeling respected in the process. So that's
well, you know, it's hard. No, let me not. It's not even hard. It's really impossible to be truly objective about anything because we all have our context. But I've tried hard, and I've tried to get rid of the "ite" monikers, which were always intended to be derogatory. You know, I think in your prayer tonight, Paul, you said something about false prophets, and somebody once asked me, well, of all these people in your book, how many of them are false prophets? And I said, well, all of them or none of them, depending on what you believe. And you know, because how do I determine, you know, the guy that I follow is not a false prophet, therefore everybody else must be. I shared a similar conversation. I think it was in 2007 at John Whitmer Historical Association at our final morning session. And I said, you know, who am I to say that Fred Larson does not receive revelation? Just because I'm not in Fred's group and just because I don't raise my hand to acknowledge him as a prophet doesn't mean that I'm right and he's wrong, objectively speaking. And so I've tried really hard in the book to be respectable and to be respectful, still have disagreement, but there's just so many colors in the rainbow of the movement that I think it's not just interesting and sometimes curious, but I think we need to be able to see a lot of that to really have a greater appreciation for what's been going on the last 200 years. I mean, if we look at the first vision at 1820, that's been 200 years. So, you know, there's just a tremendous variety and approach. Millions of faithful people. Some of you may be aware of Alan Tyree's book a few years ago called Millions Call It Scripture, about the Book of Mormon.
And his bottom line is, well, if millions of people call it scripture, then it's scripture, regardless of how it came to be. And not everybody agrees with that view. But I had the great honor and pleasure of working with Alan on that book as his editor, and then did some oral histories with Alan. Alan's got a great mind, and his thesis is worthy of looking at. Regardless of how you feel about the Book of Mormon, Alan's thesis is worthy of looking at and considering, so if we can't respect and talk with each other, then let's just go home,
Let me provide the context for that false prophet statement. I said, we see schisms,
yeah,
families torn by religious dissent.
yeah,
Wonder where is hope for healing
yeah,
and Zionic intent.
yeah.
I'd like to hope that in a forum like this, we can see.
Indeed.
So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Aspie, it's your turn, and then Blair Bryant. Go ahead, Aspie.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Steve.
Good
You
morning.
said something. Yes, well, here in Ghent, it's 4:15 a.m. Ghent, Belgium. It's the middle of Europe.
Yeah.
I am telling you that on Amazon, I copied it in the chat, but I will look it up immediately, that your book is going to be released officially on the 12th of September of 2022. It's edition by Signature Books,
Right.
and it has 2 volumes for 5 pages, and then 554 pages, and each of them is paperback and is in euros 22-24 price guaranteed. I don't know if you can read the chat, because in the chat I just copied the statement of Amazon about your book. So if you see anything in the chat window concerning your book that Amazon is now publishing, well, be my guest to read it and tell Amazon, guys, you're wrong or you're good. Okay, that was one point. That's it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Aspie. Okay, Blair, your turn. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, my friend. How are you? Good to see you.
Just fine. Back in the limited time that we've had together, I didn't know that you had a Korean background.
Oh.
I spent 4 years in Korea myself, 76 through 80.
Okay.
But I was for the United States Army.
Yeah. Oh, I had no idea. I knew you'd spent much of your time in Germany, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
but also Korea for, wow.
Yeah, I was 4 years in Korea.
Well, we were here at the same time.
Oh, is that right?
We just didn't know each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question going way back.
Okay.
Do you know of Bill Wenham?
Oh, yes. Yep. Bill was a good friend. Yep.
Bill Wenham was my high school best buddy.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let the people know that Bill Wenham's the one that started the church over there.
Bill Guthrie. No, you're right. It was Bill Wenham.
Yes.
Bill Wenham did the first baptisms. That's right.
Yes.
And then Bill
Yes.
Guthrie was the first missionary on the ground. Yeah. Yeah. Bill was a chaplain's assistant just after the Korean War. And he was a priest in Community of Christ and RLDS, and was down in the southern part of the country in Busan area. And the first baptisms were done in November of 1954 in the beach just west of the city of Busan. He baptized 11 young people, And that was the beginnings, way back when. That's right. Bill Wenham and Bill Guthrie came to visit Korea about 2002. They were representing the Conference of Restoration Elders.
Yeah.
And they were both wanting to try and look up old church members that they had known, from before. And, exploring the possibility of setting up a restoration branch. And as I spent 2 weeks while they were here, as Bruce earlier commented, they weren't coming to visit me specifically because I was the hierarchy, but I'm also try to be a decent person too. And so I carried them about in my car for 2-3 weeks while they were here. They were here for about a month, and helping them explore possibilities and stuff. And all of the people that they had known and baptized, we tracked down a good number of them. But Koreans tend to not have denominational loyalty very much. And so they all considered themselves members of the church in Yeonidong, the what is Community of Christ Church now, but they'd all moved away and they were attending the local Methodist, the local Presbyterian, or whatever, because they were Christians. And the label on the front door doesn't mean as much to Koreans in that regard. If you move away from where you were baptized, you can't go all the way back there if you're down in another city. So you go to the nearest good church that you can find and continue your discipleship that way. And so there wasn't any possibilities for them. But I had such a wonderful time with both Bills. And they were just, okay, we had our differences of opinion about hierarchy and all of that, but really good, solid people, dearly departed now, but lovely gentlemen. And we had a wonderful fellowship time together, and I did everything in my power to help them pursue their particular mission of trying to find ways to reconnect and to connect with people with the gospel. And we maintained friendship ever after until both men passed on. But anytime I was in Independence, I was always, we'd get together and chat a little bit. And didn't have, by the time I met them and got to know them, we didn't have a whole lot of time left. There wasn't too many years beyond that. But one of the things that I really appreciate about Bill Guthrie, he was quite a picture taker. He gave me all of his color slides of photos that he'd taken of the church in Korea for the 2 years that he and his wife were here. And I got them all scanned, and they're now in the archives in Independence. But what a treasure, what a resource, what a wonderful couple of people. And now that Blair, now that I know you were buddies with Bill Wenham, that's another connection we have, and I'm really grateful for that. I appreciate knowing that.
I want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Remarking about your article in the Restoration Studies about the 4 books and the characters transcript.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your fairness. I think you did a great job in summarizing the 4 different approaches and giving an overview of each of them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
I
for
appreciate that. I tried hard. I tried hard. Thank you. Yeah.
And
all these folks in this chat know Blair's work on the translation of the characters manuscript, I hope. If not, you need to look it up. It's a worthy read.
I've made several presentations on it in this form.
Okay, good. Yeah.
We've also had presentation by Jerry Grover, and I didn't see Jerry Grover's characters presentation listed in your book.
It's there.
It's there. It's one
there.
of the 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Go back to the very back of the book to the finding keys and look under the names.
Grover will be there.
And Grover should be there. If not, then somebody at the publishing house didn't pick up a correction. I hope it's not been missed. Anyway, yeah.
All right.
Blair, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I want to comment on what Steve said about Fred Larson being possibly a prophet. Because of my work and overseas working for the Army, I spent a lot of time in Army chapels, and it turned me around from my one true church viewpoint to know that God's working with anybody who is willing to work with him.
Amen.
And I see nothing at all wrong with having multiple prophets. God reveals himself to a person who is willing to listen, but he's always got his own biases. And there's nothing that we can do to completely eliminate the biases, and God doesn't rubber stamp us, in my opinion. So my whole life was redirected as a result of my working with people outside of the church and the Army chapels and so on. I want to thank you, Steve. I'll get out of here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Blair. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Blair. Sorry about the train, guys. Monty and then Paul. Go ahead, Monty.
Okay, I forgot to mention, you said something about Dave Bowerman earlier.
Yes.
When I first joined the church in the 70s, Dave Bowerman was the stake president in Kansas City State.
Yep.
And I was impressed that, I was young, hadn't run into the church before, and I had all kinds of questions. And once in a while, I'd have the opportunity to stop by the stake office, and if he was there, he always made the time to talk to me.
Yeah.
And tried to clear up any issues I had, and
Yeah.
I was always very impressed with that. He did delegate me to someone.
Yep. Dave was a really good man. Yep.
He also would stand in the Book of Mormon class at Central Congregation stake office. And this class was normally taught by Norman Burnauer.
Oh yeah.
And,
yep. Sure.
And, when Norman had to take a Sunday off to go preaching elsewhere, Dave would stand in for him. He was always tickled when we call it the Book of Norman.
The book. Yeah. Yeah. Norm Burnauer was another one of the good guys. Yep.
Monty, were you finished?
I'm done, huh? Thank you.
Thanks. Paul and then Rick. Go ahead, Paul.
It's Rena that wants the question here.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rena.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
I'm originally from Tahiti.
Yes.
My family and the church family, Zion is very important. And talk about it, and we want it so bad, that it's just kind of something that we look forward to.
Yes.
My question is, because I'm interested in the church in Korea, what concept of Zion, or what are they interested in when you talk about it at church? Is it Zion important? And you discuss about it, people dream about it. What can you tell me about
okay. Yeah, it's a very different prospect, I think, than what you grew up with, Rena. We just had the discussion on Sunday about World Conference next year. And we're sitting around after church. We had lunch, and several of us are sitting there. And one of the church priesthood members, one of the elders, said, "Oh, Steve, are you going to go to World Conference next year?" And I said, "I don't know. It's such a long trip." And she said, "Well, what's so important about doing it in Independence?" So guess what we talked about?
Pardon me. And we do talk about Zion in our Korean language church literature. But, I can't, Rena, are you familiar with Israel A. Smith's revelation that he gave at the Teraval conference in 1950? Oh dear.
He was there.
No, I was a baby.
She's not that old. You might have been a baby there. 54 maybe it was, or 53, or I'm not sure exactly.
I remember.
Anyway, that the issue in Tahiti came up because the idea of Zion in RLDS Church was that everybody would someday move to Jackson County, and some of the, not just some, but a good number of the church leaders in Tahiti's one of the bigger churches that we have outside the US. And it's probably the most solidly founded theologically and leadership-wise, financially, compared with other missions that were done in more recent years. So the people are well-read, well-schooled, and they said to President Israel A. Smith, we're all fishermen. We live on the sea. What would we do in a landlocked place like Independence, Missouri? There's no sea there. There's no fishing there. We're not farmers. What would we do? What would we eat? We can't speak English. And so Israel took that matter to prayer, and they were having what would we have called it, a mission conference, I suppose, or something like that, in a small town, I don't know, it's several miles from the main city of Papeete, kind of to the south. There's a big island of Tahiti and a small island, and there's a little isthmus that connects the two, and there's a congregation there. It's now called the Israel Congregation. They were having a reunion, basically, or a conference there. And I've seen the handwritten document of the revelation. Israel Smith prayed and received a revelation and wrote it all out on paper. And I've seen that handwritten document. And in the document, he said, you do not need to move to Independence to have Zion. We need to create Zion here where we are. And I look at, and I've been to Tahiti a few times on church assignments, so I have a little bit of familiarity. I've preached in a half a dozen of the different congregations on Tahiti, Tahiti Nui. I haven't preached at Israel congregation. Over on Moorea, the two congregations I've preached there. I know a little bit, only a little bit, but the folks in Tahiti have taken that message from Israel A. Smith 70, 80 years ago now to heart. And I see some really powerful glimpses of Zion in the Community of Christ congregations in Korea, or in Tahiti. I would dearly love to have something like that in Korea. And we may not talk about overtly the word Zion, because there's no translation into Korean for that, and so you have to learn, what that means. But in 3 weeks' time, we're going to have our first reunion or family camp in about 25 years. We had one when I was here as pastor, haven't had one since. But we're going to camp out at the church and have our reunion family camp at the church, sleeping all together, setting up tents inside the building. We'll set up tents. We don't have lots of ground to go outside and set up tents on, so we have a 5-story church building, and we can clear away the chairs in the sanctuary and have a great big huge room. We can set up our little pup tents there, and When we built the new church building, we installed shower rooms in the restrooms. That was a real high priority for me, so that we could use the facility better. And we've got a big kitchen in the fellowship hall, and we're going to do, it'll be just a couple of days, but it'll be just like what many of you who are RLDS folks know about reunions or family camps. We'll do our best, and that we'll get a little bit of that Zion type living there, but our folks are all, you know, whenever we do anything, we all get together, we all pitch in, we all do it together, and we are concerned for one another. We keep in touch regularly, and the members of the congregation are spread out. The city of Seoul is a gigantic metropolis, and you know, I'm not the only one who travels for an hour and a half to go to church. There's several in the congregation who travel similar distances to gather at the church, and that in and of itself is a bit of Zion, where you want to be with those people. So that different cultural dynamic than in Tahiti, but I think a very similar kind of an expression is something that we've always strived for here in Northeast Asia, in all of our congregations here, and to varying degrees, we have some of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Raina. Yeah. Bill Gunlock's over here waving his hand too. So moderator, get to him somehow.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a very close friend in the Tokyo church. His name was Hiroshi Yamada
Yep.
Sensei.
Yep.
I haven't heard from him for years and years. Is he still alive?
Oh yeah, yeah. I email occasionally with him. Yeah, I had an email not too long ago. He and his wife are, you know, they're up there in years, and
Yes.
as any of us know, you know, as we get older, the mind may still be functioning perfectly, but the body doesn't want to cooperate always. So they have some minor health issues, but minor. It's hard for them to, you know, the get up and go element is a little challenging sometimes. And but no, he's in good spirits. He and Mizuko, his wife,
Mizuko, yes.
Yeah, lovely friends. Yep. Yeah, they would be, oh golly, into their 80s at least, I think. Something like that. And here in Northeast Asia, that's considered pretty old for that generation. You know, they grew up at a time where they kind of crossed the threshold of World War II and all of the stuff after that, and then the Korean War here in Korea. Nutrition and sanitation and health were always challenges in those people's younger years. So
I remember he came to Taiwan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if our people there caught it or not, but he said the Bible points to God.
Uh-huh.
The Bible is not God.
Uh-huh.
It's to God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that in those days, that was very important, but I don't know if it ever caught on in Taiwan.
I learned that also from Yamada-san, and it was a profound revelation to me.
Yes.
And I never looked at the Bible literally as God, you know, but that the Bible points to God was just a profound, you know, he really he was our theological thinker in the church in Asia.
Yes.
All of Asia.
I was fortunate to fly to Australia with him.
Oh yeah.
Conference there. We talked and talked and talked on there.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, he's we aren't able to travel yet to Japan. That's been cut off since the pandemic started, you know, almost 2.5 years ago.
The Japanese government has cut it off. They just opened up. You can go in a tour group, but you have to stay with your tour group. I dearly, dearly want to. I mean, for me to go to Tokyo is like for somebody in Kansas City going to Des Moines. You know, I mean, it's just a, you know, it's not a big deal. So for me to go to Tokyo, I can hop on a plane and go there for just a little bit of money. But because of the restrictions because of COVID, I can't do that. But I dearly would love to be able to just hop over there and spend a few days and have a visit with Yamada and some of the other folks that are friends at the church.
Yeah. When you can go, please give Yamada Sensei and Michiko
absolutely
a hello for me.
You bet. Yep, absolutely will. They'll be delighted to hear from you. Yep. Yep. Good.
I think it's Rick.
Go ahead.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, Rick.
No, Shane, it's Rick,
Rick.
and then you can go next, Shane.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, for your presentation. I'm not sure what time it is in Korea where you are.
Oh, it's almost lunchtime, so that's not bad.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm not starving. Don't worry.
Okay. I noticed the title of your book is includes the hyphenation Smith-Rigdon.
Yes.
How and why did Rigdon get hyphenated with Smith?
Well, that's my creation. As I've studied the history, for reference, there's a magazine, a journal called Dialogue, a journal of Mormon thought, and my full-length paper is published there. What? Can anybody help me remember what year that was? It was, oh dear, fall 2019 edition, and I lay it out in great detail. It's quite a long article. But when we what got me started thinking is the words Latter-day Saint do not resonate with everybody in the movement. That's it's not a universal idea. Years ago, I was really good friends with a a cappella Churches of Christ Campbellite minister and a preacher, they called them. And you know, the restoration is something they've used a lot longer than Latter-day Saints have. And so I began really digging into that and said, well, in the academic world, scholars of the not Joseph Smith Restoration movement look at Campbell as the Stone Campbell movement. Because Barton Stone and Alexander Campbell were the two preeminent personalities that were kind of the fathers of disciples of Christ, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, independent Churches of Christ, and Churches of Christ a cappella. They have about as many expressions of their movement as we do of ours. Pardon me. So I thought, well, in academia, maybe it would be more useful for us to do something similar. But would Rigdon be a good candidate for that is a valid question. Because later on, and as we look back through history, Rigdon kind of, had a terrible falling out with Joseph. But as I got to digging, and we both the Campbellites, there I used that word again, the Stone Campbell movement and us have sort of rubbed Rigdon out of the histories. Rigdon was a prominent leader in the Stone Campbell movement in its earliest years. He was considered one of the three witnesses of the Restoration.
by the people in those days. Rigdon and Campbell went on mission trips, preaching trips together for years. Rigdon wrote prolifically in the Millennial Harbinger, Campbell's newspaper. Rigdon was a bishop it was called, it was a Baptist style church, but they didn't have a specific name, but Rigdon was a bishop in Iowa and had several congregations in the Kirtland area, what's now Kirtland area. Rigdon trained Edward Partridge, Orson and Parley Pratt, for example, as preachers in the Campbell style approach to the gospel. Joseph Smith never used the word restoration referring to his own work. Whenever it shows up in the early sections of the Doctrine and Covenants, it has to do with the restoration of Israel, has nothing to do with restoring the first century church. Never used the terminology until Rigdon gets involved in the mix. And it's Rigdon who introduces that stuff to Joseph. Rigdon is the one who came up with the new name of the church that was officially adopted in 1834, called the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Rigdon was the millennialist, or millenarianist, I guess is the right word. Rigdon and Campbell had a falling out in August of 1830. Rigdon wanted to have the spiritual gifts, talking in tongues, the Holy Spirit, that kind of stuff. Rigdon wanted to have the communitarian lifestyle and develop. They had a couple of places in the Kirtland area where they were practicing that communitarianism. Parley Pratt is the one who introduces Rigdon back to the Book of Mormon, and the Rigdon's first response was, "This is hoo-ha," but read it and became convinced. Rigdon travels over the winter to New York, Pennsylvania. I can't remember exactly where Joseph and Emma were living at the time, and spends the rest of the winter with them. And during the time that he's there, Joseph gives a revelation appointing Rigdon to be his equal and to be his spokesperson. And there are a number of revelations after that where Joseph and Signy jointly are receiving those revelations, jointly having visions of Jesus and the eternal realms. It was, even though Joseph had started a little bit on the revision of the Bible, it was Rigdon who got that project going again. Rigdon wrote the Lectures of Faith that used to be in the Doctrine and Covenants. So it wasn't that Joseph wasn't involved. It's Rigdon's. Rigdon was a very well-educated person considering the times. He was considered by his peers to be a walking Bible. And when they dedicated the Kirtland Temple in 1836, Rigdon preached for almost 3 hours. That's phenomenal. Who of us would even listen? We don't even want to listen for 30 minutes anymore. But Rigdon was a great speaker. He was able to articulate well. He was his training. He was much better at reading and writing and grammar than Joseph was. Joseph really was not book learned, book taught. Some of his written letters and stuff are pretty. The English teacher wouldn't have given him even a C, I think. And I'm not saying that to criticize Joseph. I'm just saying that those two men became partners, and Rigdon brought into the little church of Joseph about 5 times more people than Joseph had. And when the first 12 apostles were chosen, 6 of them were Rigdon's people, if not more. I have to look at the list again, but Rigdon's people far outnumbered Joseph's people. And Rigdon persuaded Joseph to move to Ohio and set up the church headquarters there. And I believe that we can never go back and suppose what might have happened if, but
in my mind, is very likely that without Rigdon's involvement there, Joseph Smith's group would have just eventually, gone on and done a few things, but I don't think it would have ever become as powerful as it became. So if we can get rid of the lens of retrospection and look at it from the forward thing, Rigdon was a very positive influence in shaping the language of the church, in putting articulation to the theological principles, the beliefs. I think it was a great partnership, a merger of two somewhat distinct but similarly looking for forward-looking groups. And so it's simply a proposal of mine that academically, not from a faith perspective, but in academia, that instead of calling it the Latter-day Saint movement or the Restoration movement, which are both have their issues, that Smith-Rigdon movement is probably a more apropos term. And then depending on where your personal faith is about Rigdon, you either follow Brigham Young's view that Rigdon was a jerk, or you follow Rigdon's view that Brigham Young was a jerk because they excommunicated each other. Rigdon wouldn't go along with Brigham, so Brigham excommunicates him, and Brigham says, fine, I excommunicate you too. Who had the authority to excommunicate the other? Well, they both did, and neither of them did. So, where's the false prophet here? So I think it's a proposal that I hope academia will discuss, Rick. It's not, I'm not saying that we should throw away all of our personal faith or anything like that. I think I think you can find the dialogue Journal of Mormon Thought online. I think you're able to get to that from their website without a subscription. You should be able to pull up that.
Jason Smith, I believe, put that in the chat box.
Oh, in the chat box, you got a link? Okay.
Well, I think Jason put it there, I believe.
Oh, well, that's what I mean. There's everybody, you can go to the chat box and find that link. Very good. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, it is there.
I would ask you to take a look at that. It can give you a better explanation than my little thumbnail sketch, but I hope I've at least started that discussion. Rick, is that?
Yeah, that's fine. Do you know did anybody write down this revelation? What Joseph got to appoint Sidgwick Rigdon his equal?
Oh, yeah, it's in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Okay, I can find it then.
I'm just having to scan my article. Oh dear. I reference it. I footnote it in my article. Is it section? Oh gosh. I should have made a list of those.
That's okay.
I'm not well prepared for that specific.
You didn't know what questions were going to be asked.
Well, I could have predicted that one. I should have been more prepared.
And I waited so long to ask it.
Yeah. Well, what do we say? What do we do? Try section 34 in the RLDS or 35 in Salt Lake City edition.
So it's not in the Book of Commandments then?
That I can't tell you. I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't look there.
34. I'll compare them. I have both.
Yeah. It's early enough that it could very well be in the Book of Commandments. Because this would have been, I think, February of 1830. So it could very well be in the Book of Commandments. I just simply didn't look.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's
fine.
a good reminder to go back to the earlier stuff. I need to keep that in mind. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah. Well, I have another question, but time is getting on and there's a couple of hands. So maybe if there's time left at the end, I'll raise my hand again.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I'll yield to the other people. Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
very
Rick.
much.
Monty, you're up, and then Earl will be next. Go ahead, Monty.
Years ago, I attended a wedding in Independence, and Wally B was in attendance. That was back when he was the prophet. And at the reception, he sat at the table we were at, and they got a discussion going about what constitutes a Sabbath. And because the Jewish people celebrated on a Saturday,
Right.
and we celebrated on a Sunday. And why didn't we, if we were, the true church, celebrate on Saturday too? We've gotten this discussion. I said, well, really, it would only consist of a very minor adjustment. I mean, then we would be known as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Saturday Saints.
Yeah.
But I learned all about false prophets from a false financial counselor.
Oh, okay. Ooh, that sounds like that might be a really gory story. Oh dear.
Okay, were you done, Monty?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Earl. You'll have to unmute, Earl.
There. Well, my background within our church goes back to a Stubbert. And that was in the,
Okay.
That was in the early church. And I'm sure that Wanda is on tonight. And probably where we kind of come together. So anyway, but besides that, in 1972, on my way to Thailand to do my PhD thesis, I stopped in Taiwan and met a boy from a Christian, and he took us out to his church, and we were very, very well received and very friendly. And I've always remembered that, people are the kind of the same all over the world.
Yeah.
Then I went to Nigeria, and I did spend several times with the Nigerian congregation. A couple of times was Roy Cheville.
Wow.
It's wonderful to see him preaching there.
Yeah.
Gobert Edet was doing the translation. And he was standing beside Roy Cheville and making the exact same hand saying, just mimicking Roy Cheville.
Yeah. Wow.
And he is an excellent preacher.
Yeah. Yep.
From there, of course, we went to Brazil. And apparently you have not been much to South America.
Nope, I've never been to South America at all. Central, yes, but not South.
Not South. Okay. So you probably was the Honduras church.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the largest one there.
Yep. That's right.
I've been there too. So, but anyway, but we had a nice group in Brazil. I met several Mormons and good friendly people. I guess in Nigeria, we did have a couple older people who were missionaries into Nigeria, and they were saying that they weren't getting very far. Well,
yeah, they had a rough start. Yep.
Yeah, well, yeah. Brazil had a rough start too, and I think it's pretty well faded out by now. But anyway, I would very, very appreciate your talk tonight and your points of view and I'll probably be buying your book as soon as we get offline.
Well, very good. I don't make much money off of it, but that's okay.
I don't care if you don't make any. It's your point of view that I'm looking for.
You don't write and publish a book in the hopes of ever making money. That's for sure.
No.
That's not the one.
Well, I don't think anybody here has ever seen my book, so. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you,
Thanks, Earl. And Shane, I have to apologize to you for not calling on you. I'm used to the little hand up in the corner. So go ahead, please, Shane, and then Wanda.
Yes, my question's about the church in Korea now. Has the inspired version or any portion of it ever been used in Korea?
No, not at all. Oh, no, I take that back. There was a translation of Genesis that was done early on, but it was way back in the 70s, and I'm not even sure where I could put my hands on a copy of it. But yeah, no, you know, again, it has to do with resources. And that was never a priority for translation. I mean, you know, when you look at the church's priority, even though, you know, officially the inspired version's an addition, the priorities mostly been on the Doctrine and Covenants first, then the Book of Mormon second. And by the time we get that far, we've run out of steam pretty much when it comes to the financial resources that are available.
Right, and also, has the new Elvis movie come out to Korea yet?
Has what? Say again?
Has the new Elvis movie come out to Korea?
The new Elvis movie?
Yes, with Tom Hanks as Colonel Tom Parker.
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look online to see what the theaters are doing, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. Koreans love music of all kinds.
All right, Wanda, it looks like it's your turn. Go ahead, please.
Well, I want to apologize for being offline so long, but my computer decided it didn't like what I had up and it blue lined, and then it went to a restart after it diagnosed itself.
Oh dear.
So it took me almost into the middle of the thing before I got my video to work and my screen up. So I was trying to tell Paul what books I was going to take tomorrow to one of his sons-in-law to give to him from Audrey Stubbard, because she's was my mother-in-law, and Paul is my nephew. I once introduced him as my niece. Backwards, I got backwards. But anyway, I wanted to know.
Wanda, that's okay, because in the Korean language, we only have one word and it's niece or nephew. So we could have said you were speaking Korean with English words, perhaps. Audrey was a good friend. I knew Audrey really well.
Yes, I know you must have. And maybe I met you at conference once, but I don't remember.
We probably did, but yeah. So anyway, Wanda,
because we were always up in the publications booth with her.
Yep.
But anyway, I was in Korea teaching for 2 different sessions.
Oh.
And of course, the first thing I did after I got in at 2 o'clock in the morning was call Mary Lou. And her mother-in-law answered the phone, told me she was at church. And a little while later, I heard a phone call was for me. So I answered it. And the man introduced himself as Pauline. And I thought he was saying Pauline.
Oh, yeah. I know Paul. Yeah.
But anyway, came to get me and took me to lunch with the church people.
Yep.
And they took me all over to meet Brother Ferris, Dean Ferris.
Oh, right.
To the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial, which was right across from where I was teaching in the telephone company.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And then while I was there, Helen Brotherton came.
Okay, yeah.
And she was a good friend of mine in Columbus.
Okay.
And so we have a lot of connections to the Taiwan church through all of those people.
Yep.
But anyway, I didn't really want to ask you a question. I just was curious about what time you were there in Taiwan.
Well, I was responsible for Taiwan between about 99 and 2004.
Okay.
I was at that point, I was in Korea between 96 and 2004. But then over the years, from the time I joined the church in 81, I was at the 82 World Conference translating for the Koreans, and met some of the first folks from the Taiwan church back then. So I've known Mary Lou and Pauline and that group of folks for all of those years. So it's been a long time, and I really appreciated being able to spend some time working with them and working with the church in Taipei. Those were good years.
I think I was there in 1988.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
no, 88, I was in England.
Okay.
Anyway, I think I was there in 89.
Okay. Yeah.
And also been in China, Malaysia, and Singapore, so forth.
Okay.
Had some LDS members in Singapore.
Yeah.
Introduced themselves as elders.
Yep.
And then I introduced myself as an elder, and I watched their reaction.
That's always interesting, isn't it?
Yes, because it was pretty close to the time when we were allowed to be those things.
Right. Yep.
So, but anyway, I enjoyed what I got to hear.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, Paul, you've recorded this, so I suppose people can look at the recording later if they want to review.
Oh, yes, I'll be able to see it. And I could hear you part of the time when I finally got everything up working.
Okay, well, very good. Yeah, good. Well,
But I retired in 1995, so I'm getting old.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, about next month, I'll be 92.
Oh, well, early happy birthday.
Thank you. So that's all.
Great. Thanks, Wanda.
Thank you, Wanda. Bruce put in a comment that it's a pleasure to realize how many people have experience with the church in so many different cultures.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. I see we've lost quite a few people already. It's getting late.
Well, actually, yeah, it's almost 10 o'clock though, so we're doing pretty
10 o'clock
good.
Central.
We've got a pretty good group here, so.
Okay.
And Aspie's still on. It must be what, Aspie, about 5? Getting close? Yeah, 5 a.m. for Aspie. So Paul, nobody's got their hands up.
I guys don't have to hang up, but Earl made a comment that I wanted to respond to because this has been such a refreshing session for me because my own life has been blessed by so much of the history itself. And he talked about Gobernadette, and when Gobert was at Graceland, I had the chance to volunteer to go back to Nigeria with him because at that point he did not have it going back with him, and he indicated that he would be like a leaf falling from the tree if he didn't take someone back who could verify for him that he was accepted in the church. For Roy Cheville, there is a real soft spot because when my little sister died, it was the Chevilles that I understand helped pay for the funeral to make it so that she could be appropriately buried.
Wow.
And Roy Cheville was one of the people that answered my dad's questions, so that and he had walked from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Lamoni, Iowa to go to college.
Wow.
And in 2 years of going to Graceland, Roy Cheville was one of his primary teachers that answered his questions about the church.
Yeah.
Dad decided that he wanted to be a part of this church. And as a matter of fact, the experience in Lamoni made it so that after a few years teaching in Wyoming, he moved his family back to Lamoni. And I had the rich experience of the good numbers of significant people in history, including some of the people that founded Lamoni.
Right. Wow.
Mr. Stebbins, for example.
Oh, yeah.
He was secretary to the church in the early Lamoni years. The Cowan sisters were among the early residents of Sandwich before Lamoni got to be Lamoni. Just simply to recognize that my life has been blessed with such a wealth of historical experience, besides, of course, the privilege of digging at Nauvoo and enjoying the archaeology there for these years, and now writing about it. I do feel blessed. I feel that I be able to see how, here you respond to my wife and point out that Zion takes different dimensions in different cultures, and for her to be able to come to the United States to participate in Zion because her parents wanted her to, they prayed for her to, her grandparents wanted her to come to be in Zion. And yet I go to Tahiti and I see Zion there more clearly than I do here. It's just an amazing thing to get good cross-cultural experience. And thank you, Steve, so much for sharing your cross-cultural experience with us tonight.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure to spend my morning with you. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm glad we got online despite our communications flub ups.
Steve, there has been a request for your email. Can you put your email in the
Oh.
chat for people? Are you willing to do that?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's not a,
Okay.
not a.
Rick, there you go. Be ready.
I sent you and again, that would have been the wrong address, so therefore that's why.
Yeah.
But I'm so pleased that you showed up tonight because I didn't want to have to be your backup.
Well, I am too. I really was. I'm sure glad my friend Jason put a Facebook post up. I might have missed it completely. Oh dear. Well, anyway, we got here and I've had an enjoyable chat. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. We'll sing our good night song and invite people to continue the discussion afterwards if they'd like.
Okay.
Maybe you could sing in Korean.
Good night. His blessings go before you. Good night. And we'll be praying for you. So good night. May God bless you.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Bye.